This is a pretty loaded part of the schedule coming up with games against the Capitals, Bruins, and Flyers. What are you hoping to find out about your team and stacking up against the top competition of the division?
Yeah, obviously these teams from a record standpoint certainly have separated themselves from everybody else in our division. We think our division is deep. There's a lot of good teams in our division, and obviously you're talking about teams that have been vying for the Stanley Cup here. But again, we're going to find out an awful lot about our group as we have game in and game out in the short season so far about, are we going to continue to be able to compete, play at a pace, and put ourselves in a position to win game after game. And that's, at the end of the day, that's what you got to do. And we've put ourselves in a position to win more than our record indicates, but it's not good enough. And we've just got to continue to get better. We've got to continue to play as one and play a good team game. And when we do that, we think we got enough talent to capitalize on our approach to the game when we play as one.
Next question comes from Vince Mercogliano with USA Today Network. Vince, go ahead.
Hey, David. We talked about it in the immediate aftermath of the win the other night, but now that you've had a few days to kind of, I guess, collect your thoughts and all that, how important was that win the other night, given the disappointing results you guys had in previous games, given everything that was swirling around the team? I mean, did you sense that win was about as big as you could have at this early point in the season? And then you talked about it being a springboard. Are you sensing that the team really is feeling good from what happened the other night?
Well, when you start 1-4-1, anytime you get a win to stop the bleeding is important, but certainly under those unique circumstances that we faced, it was probably a little bit more important. And again, like I said, we've got 5 out of our last 6 points. We're starting to get back to 500. Obviously, we've got some big games coming up here against really good teams. And, your mindset is important. How you feel about yourself. Confidence comes from doing things well over and over again. It's not something, a magic pill we can give our players to give them confidence. Confidence comes from doing the right thing over and over again and getting rewarded for it. So, to me, the fact that we've gotten 5 out of our last 6, our group feels better about itself because we have got some points here in this little stretch and we're digging ourselves out of the hole we created. So, it was important for a variety of reasons.
Next question comes from Colin Stevenson with Newsday. Colin, go ahead.
Dave, I know you're, as the head coach, you're probably not focused on the technical stuff that Benoit is doing with the goalies, but with that said, I mean, do you have any idea what Igor may have done, why Igor may have started slowly and what he may have, are there technical adjustments that he may have made in the last couple of weeks to get it to raise his game, or is it more attitude, or what do you think it is?
I think that position is so mental. I think these guys are, naturally technically sound. You don't get to this point without, obviously you're always looking to improve your technique, but I think they're technically sound to the point where, the mental side of it is way more important than the technical side of it. So to me, like we've talked about, I mean, it is a different year. The circumstances are different, and these guys are young goalies trying to establish themselves consistently. And so I think that's kind of been a little bit of it, but I think Shesty, just talking about Shesty, I think his last 2 games have been good, and we're hoping he builds on it.
Next question comes from Dan Rosen with NHL.com. Dan, go ahead.
Hey, David, this is an off-ice question. So normally, in any season, it's always important to integrate rookies into the team, especially early in the season. This season is different because off-ice interactions have to be limited.
Right.
So speaking specifically to Keandre and Alexei, are there ways in which they're being supported differently this season, or need to be supported differently than from previous seasons?
Yeah, I mean, to me, everything is so locked down and so monitored that it is difficult to create those natural bonds that young players form with their teammates, especially the rookies. But the good news is we had an 8-day road trip, and all we could do was stare each other in the face. So I think that early road trip certainly helps overcome some of the restrictions that these guys have when we're home. So I think that our guys have fit in well. Our guys have embraced the young players, and there's a pretty good feel in that locker room.
Next question comes from Stephen Wino with the Associated Press. Stephen, go ahead.
Hey, David, the league put in a bunch of new protocols this morning. They're taking the glass away behind benches, all virtual meetings. I'm curious, as you're trying to kind of do your job during games, preparing for games, how you expect this to change while you've already had a bunch of protocols to listen to?
Yeah, Steve, we just obviously got those late last night. We're still kind of sifting through it, trying to map out a plan. Obviously, we had a plan today, and we had to alter it a little bit. So, that's something we'll have a lot more clarity on by the end of the day.
Next question comes from Mark Rosenman with Sports Talk New York. Mark, go ahead.
Well, Coach, you mentioned the youth of the team. When you have guys that probably grew up idolizing players like Crosby, and specifically tonight, Igor, I could assume that he idolized, Ovechkin growing up. Do you have to say anything to them about it? And on the personal level for you, are there coaches that you grew up idolizing that you're against, and when you see them, something goes through your mind?
I think if I was coaching this league 20 years ago, that would be the case, but, I'm probably older than half the guys in this league, so, and a lot of the guys that are my age are a little older I'm peers with, so idolizing isn't something that's happening for me right now. Respect is certainly there for all the coaches in this league, and there's so many good coaches in this league, it makes it difficult. But I think with Shesty, the guys that have been in the league a little bit, I think that aura wears off a little bit. I'm sure when Alexei faced Crosby in Pittsburgh, there was an off feeling, and I'm sure Keandre Miller goes through that every night when he steps on the ice and he sees a Crosby or an Ovechkin, a Malkin, players of that ilk. So it's just natural, but I think once a game gets going, the shift or two against those guys, I think it just becomes hockey.
Okay, we have 3 more in queue, and these will be the final 3. First, Molly Walker. Molly, go ahead.
Now that the dust has kind of settled from the previous week, what's been the message to the team heading into this tough schedule? Do you almost want the team to see it as a new portion of the schedule, a sort of fresh start going forward, or?
Yeah, I think you're always evolving as a team, especially our group, and as the season goes along, we kind of went through this last year where there was kind of a learning curve and kind of guys identifying their roles, and we're in a little bit of that situation right now, not to the extent we were last year, but we just, like I said, we want to build on what we've been doing, 5 out of 6, continue to feel good about ourselves, feel good about our effort, feel good about our team game, and we think we got enough talent to capitalize on that. So, it really, I know it's a coaching cliche and it's a sports cliche. We've just got to continue to move forward and take a game at a time. It doesn't do us any good to think about playing the Bruins or the Islanders or the Flyers because, every second you spend thinking about that, you're taking away your focus on the Capitals, and that's really what this is all about as we sit here right now and leading into the game at 7 o'clock tonight. It's all about the Capitals.
Next question comes from Vince Mercogliano. Vince, go ahead.
David, with Gauthier, he's played 16 games with you guys now, averaging 8+ minutes per game. We've talked about the skills that he has, and you've talked about where you want to see him improve, but does there come a point where you feel like he needs to be thrown into the fire more, or is that something that you still don't have the confidence to do with him?
Yeah, we did it a bit the other night. He played with Strome and Panarin for some shifts last night, and that's that balancing act, right? You got to score guys who scored his whole life. He's been a top 2-line player, but the history of this league, guys that end up playing on the 3rd or 4th line have always been top 2-line players most of their lives. So it's it's a role they have to adapt to, and he and I actually just met for a little bit before we did this, and he's a young player still trying to find his way, and he's got a lot of great qualities, and it's our job to draw it out of him consistently.
And final question goes to Colin Stevenson. Colin, go ahead.
Dave, with Capo, you said yesterday that you couldn't really necessarily explain why it didn't work with the other 2 guys, with Strome and Panarin initially, but you like what you've seen out of Capo since that time. But looking at the kind of the guy that you wanted there with Jesper Fast, with the dirty work kind of guy, I don't know that Capo is the same kind of player that Blackwell is. So with that said, I mean, does he have to adjust his game to those 2 guys? Do they have to adjust their game to him? I mean, what are his instructions when you put him up with those 2 guys?
They're no different than when he plays with another line. Obviously, he's playing with talented players, and and he's done a good job. He's gotten better and better. It's not what we have to do as a staff, and everybody has to do, is stop comparing him to where we want him to be, the ultimate player. Right? We have a vision of what we think Capo Kakko is going to look like. He's 19 years old. Our job is to continue to monitor him and make sure he continues to get better and better. And, he's doing that. And, I've said this about that line. I mean, it's not just the guy playing with those guys. It's Strome and Brett consistently doing the things that they're going to need to do to be productive offensively. You can't just be the right winger on that line. And, that's what we ask all our players to do. It's not just one guy's responsibility to play a team game and a structured game. And when that line's effective, they do the things that they need to do structurally to allow their skills to influence the game.